I am an old man now, but I still remember my childhood very clearly. It was not easy for me. My parents argued a lot. They shouted at each other almost every day. The house was full of noise and anger. It felt like the fighting would never stop. I was just a little boy. I wanted to play and be happy, but the fights made me sad. I often sat alone in my room, trying to forget the noise. I didn't know what to do. My heart felt heavy, and I wanted to cry. Sometimes, I tried to talk to my parents, but they didn't listen. They were always too angry to hear me. One day, I asked my mother why. "Do you and Dad fight so much?" She looked at me with tired eyes. "It's not your fault, my son," she said softly. But her words didn't help. The fighting didn't stop. I could hear it in the next room, and it made me feel small and helpless. At school, I tried to smile. My teacher was kind, and my friends were fun. But deep inside, I felt lonely. I wished my home could be like other homes, full of love and peace. It was hard to pretend that everything was fine when I was sad inside. I couldn't talk to my friends about it. They wouldn't understand. I started writing in a little notebook. I wrote about my feelings. It helped me feel a bit better. I didn't show my notebook to anyone. It was my secret friend. I wrote about my dreams, my fears, and the things that made me sad. Writing made me feel free. I was the only way I could express what was in my heart. I didn't know how to tell anyone about my pain, but I knew I needed to find a way. Maybe, one day, everything would be better. I hoped for that every day. As time went on, the fighting between my parents didn't stop. It seemed like it was getting worse. Every day, I woke up to the sound of shouting. It was hard to start the day in a house like that. I tried to stay away from them. I would play outside, but the noise always followed me. Even when I was outside with my friends, I couldn't forget what was happening at home. At night, I would lie in bed, listening to the fighting. I would close my eyes tightly, hoping it would stop. But it never did. Sometimes, I would hear my mother crying. It broke my heart. I didn't know how to make her feel better. I wanted to protect her, but I was just a little boy. One night, after a big fight, my father left the house. He didn't come back for a long time. I didn't know where he went, and I didn't know if he would ever come back. I felt scared and alone. My mother didn't talk much after that. She seemed so sad and tired. I tried to be strong for her, but it was hard. My teacher at school noticed that I wasn't smiling much anymore. One day, she asked me, "Is everything okay at home?" I didn't know how to answer her. I wanted to tell her everything, but I was too scared. I just nodded and said, "I'm fine." I didn't want to tell anyone about the problems at home. I thought it was my fault. I thought if I were better, my parents wouldn't fight. I tried to be a good boy, but it didn't seem to make any difference. I wanted to be happy again, but I didn't know how. The fighting, the sadness, and the loneliness were always there. I didn't know what to do. Sometimes, I would look at other families. They looked so happy. They laughed and talked together. I wanted that. I wanted to feel safe and loved, but I didn't know if that would ever happen for me. As the days passed, I became more and more quiet. I didn't talk much to anyone. I didn't feel like playing anymore. My friends noticed, but I didn't know how to explain to them. They would ask me why I was so sad, but I didn't have the words. How could I explain to them that my home was full of fighting? One day, my father came back. He looked different. He wasn't smiling. He didn't talk much. He didn't even look at me or my mother. I felt strange. I was happy to see him, but at the same time, I was scared. What if the fighting started again? What if he left again? That night, I heard them talking quietly. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard my mother say, "I can't live like this anymore." My heart raced. I didn't want them to leave each other. I didn't want to lose my father. But I also didn't want the fighting to continue. The next day, my father left again. This time, he didn't say goodbye. I sat in my room, staring out the window. I felt empty. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I didn't want anyone to know how I felt. Days turned into weeks, and my father didn't come back. My mother seemed even more sad. She didn't smile, and she didn't talk much. She only worked at home, cleaning and cooking. I tried to help her, but I didn't know what to do. I wanted to make everything better, but I couldn't. At school, I couldn't concentrate. My mind was always at home, wondering if my father would return. But there was no answer. I started to feel more and more lost. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I didn't know if my family would ever be the same. I tried to stay strong, but it was getting harder. I didn't know how much longer I could pretend that everything was okay. One morning, I woke up to a quiet house. I didn't hear my mother's voice, and I didn't see my father's things. My mother was sitting in the kitchen, staring at the table. She didn't say anything to me. I felt like something was wrong, but I didn't know what. "Mom, where is Dad?" I asked quietly. She looked up at me, and her eyes were full of tears. "He's gone," she whispered. "He's gone for good." I felt like the world had stopped. My heart sank into my stomach. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run after him, but I didn't know where to go. I stood there for a long time, not knowing what to do. My mother stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The days after that were very hard. My mother was always sad, and she didn't smile. I tried to help her, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to fix anything. At school, I tried to pretend like everything was fine. I smiled at my friends, but I didn't really feel happy. I didn't talk about my family anymore. I just wanted to forget the fighting, forget the tears, and forget the sadness. But it was hard. It was hard to forget. Sometimes, I would remember the good times. I would remember when my father would come home and smile. I would remember when my mother would laugh and talk to me. But those memories felt like they were from a different life. As time went on, things didn't get better. My mother's sadness never went away. It seemed like she was always tired. And I was tired too. I didn't want to feel sad anymore, but I didn't know how to stop. One day, I was walking home from school when I saw my mother sitting on the porch. She looked at me and smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Come sit with me," she said softly. I walked over to her and sat down beside her. We didn't talk for a long time. The silence between us felt heavy. "Mom, why did Dad leave?" I asked. I had never asked her that before, but I needed to know. She sighed and looked out at the garden. Your father and we didn't understand each other anymore. We fought all the time, and it made everything hard. I couldn't make it work. I couldn't make him stay. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her face, hoping she would say something more. But she didn't. Her words felt like a weight on my chest. I wanted to hug her, but I didn't know how. I didn't know if she needed comfort or if she just needed to be alone. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I understood a little bit. My mother was sad because she didn't know how to fix everything. She was sorry, but it was too late. As the days passed, things didn't change much. My mother stayed sad, and I stayed quiet. We didn't talk much about the past, and we didn't talk about my father. It was easier not to talk about it. But deep down, I missed the good times. I missed the days when we were happy. I knew that things would never go back to how they were. But I also knew that I had to move forward, even if it was hard. I had to find a way to be strong. Years passed, and I grew older. I learned to live without my father, but I never stopped missing him. My mother continued to carry the weight of her past mistakes. She never remarried, and she worked hard to take care of me. There were times when I would see other children with their fathers, laughing and playing together. I would feel a deep sadness in my heart. Why couldn't my family be like that? Why did my parents fight? Why did my father leave? But over time, I realized that life doesn't always go the way we want it to. Sometimes we lose people we love, and sometimes we have to learn to move on without them. One day, I found an old photo of my father. I was young in the picture, maybe around 5 or 6. I was sitting on his lap, and we both had big smiles. I stared at the photo for a long time, remembering the good moments. I missed him so much. I looked at my mother, who was sitting in the kitchen. She was working on something, but I could tell she was deep in thought. "Mom," I said, "do you ever miss Dad?" She paused for a moment before answering. "Yes, I do. I miss the good times. But we can't change the past. We can only move forward." I nodded. She was right. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could choose how to move forward. As I grew older, I began to understand more about life and love. I knew that my parents had their problems, and they couldn't fix them. But I also knew that I had the power to heal, to forgive, and to live a life that was better than the past. I learned to let go of the anger I had carried for so long. I learned to forgive my parents for their mistakes, and most importantly, I learned to forgive myself. Now, I look back on those memories with a sense of peace. I know that my childhood was difficult, but it shaped me into who I am today. I am stronger, kinder, and more understanding because of the challenges I faced. And as I sit here today, I realize that the post no longer controls me. I am free.